Hello, welcome to Hotline.
Welcome to the Hotline and welcome to Hotline Interface. Great having you. Thank you to those joining me on rgr94fm.com, for those joining on your cell phones from the US, UK, Canada, wherever in the world you are, and those on the One Spot Media or on the RGR app on the Google Play Store and at home on JNN. Thank you so much for joining us. Today, the 22nd November 2018. This is Hotline Interface.
Emily's views, her position on the issues, her point of view backed up by the facts. Here are Emily's views.
We have some problems. Thousands of children will, sometime next year, be taking the first tranche of the primary exit profile PEP exam. PEP, as you know, has replaced GSAT as the testing mechanism for students to matriculate into the secondary school system. Contrary to a report we received earlier from the Education Minister, Roel Reid, it now appears that we may need to reevaluate and perhaps take a long pause on PEP. Floyd Green, the State Minister in Education, in responding to some questions tabled by the opposition spokesman on education, Ronald Thwaites, disclosed the following. The ministry conducted a pilot performance task. The pilot performance task assesses students' ability to strategically think and to do extended or critical thinking. This means that it was attempting to assess specific parts of the brain and to see how students are able to use those parts of the brain to think. 37,539 students sat the exam. 12,003, or 32% of those students, achieved mastery in language arts. And 22,759, or 61%, nearly met the standard. Now, in my view, nearly met means that at the time of doing the exam, you did not meet, i.e., you failed. In math, 1,379, or 3.7% of the students met the standard. 3.7% of the students in math only met the standard. And 17,568, or 47%, nearly met the standard. Remember that nearly met in the context of exam means at the end of the exam, you did not meet the standard. For science, 585, or 1.6% of the students met the standard, while 14,126, or 37.6%, nearly met the standard. Remember the meaning of nearly met the standard. Social studies, 2,861, or 7.6% of the students met the standard. 19,000 and odd, or 51.8%, nearly met the standard. We cannot send a group of nearly meeting standard students into this exam. Mr. Green said the pilot performance task, which was the component the students were tested on, it only represents 20% of the total evaluation of the overall PEP exam and cannot be used to assess the students' overall performance. Minister Green, you need to say a lot more. Because if the 20% which was tested is not that important, please let us know when it is that we're going to do a test on the 80%. And why did the ministry do a pilot performance task exam on areas that are not so important? Floyd Green is also quoted as saying in the Gleaner this morning that this test was necessary for us to ascertain where the students are in order to provide support to move them to another level. This is to see where students were in relation to strategic and extended thinking. Minister, it is my view that this deficiency that is highlighted in the failure of the students to do this critical thinking, it cannot be corrected in 6 months or so. This concept of neuroplasticity, which means the brain stretching itself and not being static as we were taught when we were younger, it requires time. So we must hear more about how the ministry intends to proceed in light of what I consider to be damning results and new tests on the horizon for our children come next year in the form of PEP. On to another matter, the public defender and the state of emergency. If the public defender Arlene Harrison Henry is correct, it seems to me we have a state of emergency within the state of emergency. Mrs. Harrison Henry told the Internal and External Affairs Committee of Parliament yesterday that residents of St. James are being taken up off the streets randomly and without legal bases as they go about their business, and they're thrown in with others, charged with crimes under the regular justice system, even though those individuals have not been charged. Up to early October, these are the numbers according to her. 3,687 persons were picked up by the police. Of that number, only 139, or about 3.8% of those were charged with a crime. And those detained are reportedly being held in conditions where there are no hand-washing facilities and lighting. Scabies, rashes, respiratory illnesses are some of the illnesses with which people are being afflicted. Toilets don't work properly, and there's hardly any air passing through the holding cells. This cannot be right, Jamaica. Is the Prime Minister aware of what the public defender has said is happening in the state of emergency? I called for access to these holding cells by the glare of media to show whether the sentiments expressed by the public defender are true. Because if they are, we are creating hogs and dogs to come out and to kill us right around the corner, not in a matter of years, perhaps in a matter of months. We've got to fix it, and we have to fix it now. Finally, that $17 million sign. Is it just a sign? Is it appropriate to call what is much more than a sign a sign? When I heard of this $17 million sign, I'm looking to see a sign stretching from Montego Bay to Kingston. And then I'm told it's not really a sign only because it's going to have some landscaping features and it's going to be beautiful water features and so forth. I actually think that that area needs something decent. And while we're at it, I think we need to come to Norman Manley as well, because it could do with a little bit of facelift. But even if it be more than a sign, is it too much to beautify the first place that visitors place their eyes on upon leaving the airport? I'm not sure. I like the conversations in Jamaica about value for money as opposed to quantum. And I think there are times when we get caught up only in the quantum and not look at what is being proposed. I actually don't know what is being proposed. And I think Tourism Enhancement Fund in 2018, you need a mock-up of your model to show to the people of Jamaica so we can better understand this $17 million price tag that you're about to put at the airport in the second city. When we come back, it's been a holiday on the road for many people. We've been driving for the last couple of days without great mayhem. That's because taxi drivers are on strike. We're getting some answers about the proposals in this new Road Traffic Act, the amendments that will be going to the Senate tomorrow, concerns coming from the taxi drivers about the Island Traffic Authority, and also about the Transport Authority. Those plus more we examine for you in detail on Hotline Interface. We're back with you on the Hotline and Hotline Interface. Thank you so much for joining us. Confusion all around. The Transport Authority is trying to clarify what appears to be some confusion among some taxi operators in relation to the proposed sanctions in the road traffic bill. At least one taxi driver believes that he has been charged and fined under a bill, which is not yet law because it's a bill. And on the basis of that belief, the entire system is almost turned upside down. You know, I've been watching some things on the BBC with the spread of fake news and how people have been murdered for fake news sent on WhatsApp in particular. I saw too many in India. News spread on about them on WhatsApp that they're going to come and take away children. And the men were mercilessly murdered by scores of individuals because of that. Even though one of the young men was bawling out, my mother is Emily Shields, I live at so-and-so, this is what I do, I'm not about to take away children. And they murdered the man. The same thing in Mexico. You should watch the series on the BBC because of a lot of what is happening here with this $75,000 ticket reminds me of that. But here we are on this program. We also want to examine for you some of the amendments in the road traffic bill, which will go to the Senate tomorrow for passage, the role of the Island Traffic Authority in the new dispensation, and what is now turning out to be the subject of great discussion, the idea in the bill, which is novel to Jamaica, but certainly not stranger to the world, where owners of motor vehicles will be sent the citation when there is an infraction committed by the driver of the vehicle at the time the vehicle was perhaps not in the control or custody of the owner. And this applies only to electronic monitoring. Yeah? So if we're still going to have police on the road handing out tickets to drivers, and that system is going to coexist in the new dispensation where you have electronic monitoring of motor vehicles. I'm joined in studio and happy to have all of them in studio with me. I have Mr. Victor Anderson, who is Program Coordinator with the National Road Safety Council. Welcome, Mr. Anderson.
Thank you.
I have the Corporate Communications Manager at the Transport Authority, Petrokeen Williams. Welcome to Hotline Interface. Good to have you. And Chairman of the Transport Authority, Cecil Morgan. Welcome, Mr. Morgan.
Thank you. Just a quick correction. You're not Chairman, Managing Director.
Managing Director. All right. Thank you. And tell us the difference.
Well, the Chairman is in charge of the organization. He's in charge of the Board of Directors.
And you are in charge of day-to-day operations.
Day-to-day operations as a Managing Director.
Okay. Firstly, the taxi operators seem to believe that there's an issue in relation to Transport Authority and a badge that you give to them.
Yes.
And the thinking, from what I understand, is that in one instance, one man was charged about $75,000 for not having a badge, and then that sum was lessened to $50,000 upon maybe pleas in mitigation. You know about that instance at all, Mr. Morgan?
Yes, I do. In fact, you know, it's important for us to be given the opportunity to clarify again the situation, because this individual, the owner, spoke to me at least 6 weeks ago about the situation in which he said that the individual had committed 2 offenses. And in addition to committing the 2 offenses, he indicated also that the man was a repeat offender by virtue of paying a number of tickets over time. But our investigation had revealed that the individual was charged for multiple offenses, right? And
Are you talking about jumping red light? You're talking about speeding, all of those things?
obstructing traffic, and also not driving. You know, he didn't have a legitimate badge, and I think he was charged 7 times for the badges for not having a badge. In addition to all of that, he was held on warrant and taken before the courts. So with the multiple charges, that is basically what, you know, why it added up to $75,000. The judge asked him if he could show or prove that he had started the process of getting a badge, then there would have been a reduction in the amount of money that he would be required to pay. So he had started the process, so he ended up paying $55,000 instead of the $75,000.
Right.
Incidentally, what happened, somebody, you know, had this information and spread it into the public domain.
When did this happen, the fine by the court?
It was sometime in September.
Okay.
Sometime in September.
Yes.
The owner spoke to me on the 23rd of September, right? It was, I don't remember exactly when in September, it was early in September. And to our amazement, right, they just spread this word, because what is happening here, Mrs. Shields, that you have a number of persons who are operators who doesn't have a badge for one reason or another. So telling somebody that you have to pay $75,000 and about 70% of the people in the system doesn't have a badge, it started to create all kind of problems.
Right. Let me understand how the badge works, Petra Keane-Williams. Why do they need one, and which part of the law provides for that now?
I think it's regulations 123, 124 of the road traffic regulations, and also sections of the contract carriage taxi regulations speak to the requirement for the badge. Now, the badge is really something to signify to the commuting public that the transport authority has done its due diligence checks. So in order to get a badge, you need to submit a police record, recommendations from, you know, the usual persons, and complete an application form, and also undergo training. Now, the public passenger vehicle training is delivered by High Trust NTA, and it covers the legislative framework, so the Road Traffic Act, the Transport Authority Act, try to get them to understand how they should operate, what they should do, and also there's customer service and conflict resolution training included.
Wow.
That's delivered by Heart, and they can do it on the weekends.
How long is the course, though, if you do it on weekends?
1 day. It's a 1 day training. So you can go in on a Sunday, do your training, and the cost for the badge and the training is $3,000.
And how many people now have badges?
About 25% of the operators in the sector.
Which would be, numbers would be like, about how many operators do we have in the sector?
About 20...
Less than 25,000.
25,000 in total?
Yes, approximately.
PPV?
Yes.
Right.
So obviously you can't count those operating the robot ones that are
No, they're
white
not
plate,
included.
right?
No, they're not included.
But 25,000 legitimate
yes.
ones?
Yes.
And 25% of the 25,000 now have a badge?
Approximately.
When every one of them should have a badge?
Right.
They should, yes.
So if you're caught without the badge now, Mr. Morgan, what's supposed to happen?
Well, you're normally charged, you know, either by the police or the transport authority inspector. And the fine is usually about $4,000 to $5,000 in
Right.
most instances. In some jurisdiction, we have been told as little as $800.
Right.
Right.
And
So-
if you have multiple charges for the same offense, what's the ultimate punishment that the court can impose? Is it demerit points? What does it lead to? Revocation of license? What is there a sanction?
It all depends, because if you're a driver,
Yeah.
right, you know, you would be taken before the courts, and if you can't pay the fine, you might be given some time to pay the fine, or you'll be arrested, right? As it relates to the owners,
Yeah.
if, let's say you're an owner driver or something like that, the matter of suspension and revocation does not occur right now, because that has been passed by our board of directors, and it is with the ministry right now waiting approval, because that's another area that we would want to go into to
Right.
address some of the issues that we're having right now.
Right. And you said it's 123 of which regulations, Petra
The
Keane?
road traffic regulations.
And that road traffic regulations will be passed pursuant to the Road Traffic Act now in effect.
No, there's the existing regulations has that. What will happen with the new Road Traffic Act is that the sections relating to public transportation have been transferred to the Transport Authority Act, which is currently under review.
Okay.
So there, you know, there's a holding period. So we will operate
Okay.
with some of the previous
Yes.
regulations
Yes.
until the Transport Authority Act is
can be
passed.
amended. Okay, okay. All right. And I know before I come to Mr. Anderson, I know that you met with some of the taxi operators
Yes.
at Transport Authority, Mr. Morgan. When you did and you were able to explain this to them, did they get it that the basis of their demonstration was not properly founded?
They were baffled. A lot of them just never understood what was happening. And in fact, we met with JATU. The first group we met with was JATU. And, you know, I just don't want to say some things right now, but the truth is I think they're a little behind time, right? And the fact of the matter is that they need to, this whole matter of leadership, they need to show more maturity in terms of their leadership. And they need to get a better understanding of the issues before they go out there. And, you know, the transport sector is a very fragile one, and if we're not careful, we'll destroy it. And I think good sense ought to prevail, to be honest with you. When we met with the Spanish Town operators, they weren't even aware of some of the things that, you know, that are being said. And that is why it's important for us to ensure that we communicate as best as we can with the public. And we'll be having a meeting, an emergency meeting this afternoon at 2 o'clock with the Taxi Association presidents, because we think it's very, very important to ensure that the information that is needed is disseminated in accordance to what we know it to be.
Where is this meeting?
Hotel Four Seasons.
Yes. And what time is that?
2 o'clock.
2 o'clock. And they have all been given formal invitations?
Yes, we did communicate with them yesterday, and we're still communicating with those we didn't get in touch with this morning.
So emergency meeting with Taxi Association Presidents, Hotel Four Seasons, 2 p.m. Transport Authority would want to meet with you. When we come back, we want to drill down to the amendments to the Road Traffic Act, the role of the Island Traffic Authority going forward, looking towards some of the figures for road fatalities that we have, and the controversial section about the owners and their responsibility under the new dispensation, subject to the Senate passing that. We'll hear from Victor Anderson, who is the program coordinator of the National Road Safety Council. We're up on a break. Welcome back to Hotline Interface, and thank you so much for rejoining me. Thank you for joining if you're just coming in. If you are a taxi operator out there or the president of one of the associations and you'd like to join us, we'd be delighted to have you. You can give us a call, 876-926-2178. And if you're a passenger on the road and you want to share, or a caller, we'd be happy to have you. Let's rejoin our panelists, Petrokeen Williams, Cessa Morgan, and Victor Anderson. Mr. Anderson, help us, the context to, I think, all of the discussion, even about amendments to the Road Traffic Act, apart from the mayhem on the roads, with the road fatalities that we're having. What are the latest figures coming out of your NRSC on the numbers?
Up to yesterday, the latest was 318 fatalities. I don't remember the number of crashes. But 318 fatalities, we're just 3 short of what took place for all of last year. So it is really a very serious situation.
And we have about 45, near 50 days to go before the end of the year.
Right.
And the period when we have most accidents, Christmas is vulnerable to that?
Christmas is vulnerable. Christmas and New Year's is one of the vulnerable times,
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. So we have that as the context always. And I heard the health minister speaking at a forum the other evening, saying that there is one incident he can recall, head injury, man riding, no helmet. And over a period of time, the cost to the public purse was 20 million to treat that injury alone, let alone the cost to families and things like those. So that has to be factored in. But tell me where we are in this new dispensation. Let's go first to the controversial matter. Tell me if you can help me with why is it that we are moving to put some responsibility on the owner of a vehicle. And as some people are saying, we're letting the driver get off because we've not been able to police them for the last however many years since the first act was in.
Well, okay, there are 2 things that have happened with the new legislation. Let me take the first one first. Any owner is now going to be required to know who is driving his vehicle. He must know his name, his address, and be able to refer the police to that driver if there is need for that. But of course, that is something that happens through the course of investigations. This would happen after the fact of an offense. If we really want electronic enforcement, since we can't have a policeman or woman on at every single intersection, at every inch of the roadway, we need to go for electronic enforcement of the Road Traffic Act. So one of the things that is coming, there are a number of private sector entities that have been beating down the doors of the government to get into partnering with the government on electronic enforcement. And this is not feasible if the offense has to be tied to the driver. Because when you capture the image electronically, it isn't always possible to get a picture that is good enough to identify the driver. So in most parts of the world where electronic enforcement is done, as I understand it, the UK, which is the mother of our legislation, Australia, which has a similar route, Canada, which has a similar route, the USA, which has completely different routes, I suppose. But in most parts of the world where electronic enforcement of road traffic offenses is done, the owner is held responsible. So based on the license plate on the vehicle, a ticket, a citation as you were calling it earlier, is sent to the owner, and the owner is held responsible. I put it to you that if we are to have electronic enforcement, it can't be done in another way. And so this concern that is being expressed by taxi owners and so on, it seems to me is just I hope I'm not sounding too uncharitable, but it seems to me it's just an effort to keep the status quo going. They preside over a totally immoral system that simply says, an owner says to a driver, bring me as much money as I want on a particular date or at the end of a week or a month or whatever it is, and I don't care what you do. It seems to me that is a most immoral situation, and the society should not allow that to continue.
Mr. Morgan, can you help me with this? There's an interesting opinion editor's piece in the Gleaner this morning. Can't catch Kwaku, really? And this is by Andre Wright. Fundamentally, the state has given up on reining in rotten drivers. Instead, the lazy police commissioner and the lazy traffic chief and their lazy minions would prefer to cock up foot and punish the owners of vehicles who may or may not know of offending drivers. Where you stand in this opinion expressed by Andre Wright?
No, I can't support that at all, to be honest with you. We have had meetings with the commissioner and his team, and they're working very, very hard in trying to address the issues out there. And as Victor just indicated, that you can't have a police officer, at every corner, to be honest with you. And this whole matter of electronic surveillance goes a long way to cover, right, with the whole aspect of Jamaica Eye being part of it, and also the townships, being, cameras being installed. It provides that level of security in terms of being able to, address certain issues that a policeman may not necessarily address.
So is it that we're going to give up on the sections of the island that will not be covered by electronic monitoring, and we will also give up on taxi operators or private individuals who now hold scores of unpaid tickets? What is it that we're going to do about them? Petra Keane-Williams, you have a thought on that?
Well, I don't think we can give up on that. I think as the government, as part of the regulatory bodies, we have to do the best we can to get persons operating in accordance with the law. And that is why the Transport Authority has the revocation policy that we are trying to put in place. And even currently, we do our best to get the operators into a system in terms of the badge training. For example, when we're issuing a road license, the owner has to name the driver and provide information on the driver, so the driver ought to have a badge. What we have found is that because most of the drivers don't want to do the training, then you don't have a large pool of operators who have the requisite qualification. So I think there needs to be more done in terms of getting those persons into training programs.
Yeah.
And I think the owners have a role to play. I don't want to underestimate the role of the owner, the
Yeah.
role of the driver, and the role of the authority.
Go back to the role of the owner in the context of the badge for me, because I didn't know that you ask of owners details, credentials of drivers before the badges are
Before the
issued.
road license
Before the
is
license
issued.
is-
Before the road license. Tell me how that process works.
Okay, so when the owner applies for a road license, he submits police record for himself. But
So
he
the owner applies for a road license for the vehicle,
for the vehicle,
and he has to submit a police record,
Right.
proof of address,
proof of address, and also information on the vehicle, including insurance and
right?
so on.
And you have these in some.
In a database.
When you say database, you don't mean some of those, what you call it, the disc that people turn over on a desk?
No, not at all. We have a license
You have it
management
electronically?
information system
You have that electronically?
electronically.
So if I were to check your database and want to put in Emily Shields, you could click on something, put search, and you could know whether I'm in your system or not?
That's correct.
You have that?
Yes, once we issue a road license, we have a database of the licensees, and we do
Okay.
send information to them. We send text messages and so on. So we do that.
Okay, that's
All
a
right.
good start, yes.
So when the operator, when the person has been granted the road license, we ask that they upgrade the insurance to PPV and they get the red plates, and they also need to provide the driver's badge, the badge for the person who will be operating the vehicle. So at that point,
Can I pause you there?
Sure.
Because I'm hearing from a lot of people now that there are some owners who have, could be 5, 6 different drivers for the same vehicle. Is that your experience, that drivers are submitting scores, owners are submitting the names of scores of potential drivers for the same vehicle?
no, what we find is that they
So you don't have that?
no, they submit one name for the vehicle.
So when people saying that you have multiple drivers, they're not really legitimately supposed to be driving this vehicle.
They have not submitted that record to the transport authority.
Okay.
And I think what we want to do as we go forward is tighten that record. And I think part of the minister's 16-point proposal speaks to that, a maintenance of a database of drivers.
Yes.
So that we can hold the drivers accountable also. So that is why I'm saying it's different players in the system, and each of us have a role to play, and none of them should be underestimated.
Let me take a break and come back. This is Hotline Interface. We're back with you on Hotline and Hotline Interface. Thank you for rejoining me on JNN. So, back with my guests. I'm learning for the first time that under the current dispensation, the Transport Authority, when it interfaces with the owners of motor vehicles who are making the application for license, to license the vehicle, then they have to disclose who it is that they intend to use as driver if they don't want to drive it themselves. And you're here for the driver to get a badge. The driver needs a clean police record, and the driver also needs to do a one-day training at heart to learn about the different laws of the land and how to behave. And presumably, I'll ask this of my guests. Let me just rejoin Petra K. Williams, Cecil Morgan, and Victor Anderson. What about ability to read and write? Is that something that is considered?
That's considered because, hard trust programs are usually done at the grade 9 literacy level. And I think that is part of that's part of the challenge in the sector, that the literacy levels are low. And so persons who are not that comfortable in a formal setting may feel uncomfortable. We have spoken to hard trust, and they have advised that, there are different learning methods that they use in the seminars, the one-day training course. So that is something that we've been looking at.
Right.
The other thing, Emily, is that some persons have a police record, and we have found that is also part of the challenge that some of the operators face.
Right, because I'm bothered that 75% of the overall group of individuals who now operate taxi or whatever on the road, they don't have this badge.
That's correct.
How is it that you corrected me, managing director? How is it that you can be policing over an entity where 75% of your group don't have this badge that would prove, 1, they have a clean police record, and 2, they went to heart for the requisite training?
That's a deficiency in the system.
When you go and correct
Right?
it?
And the Auditor General made note, when they came to our organization.
Yes.
And we have been taking steps for example, our operations team, there are times when we go on a badge drive, meaning that, they would go and they'll, check for persons or operators with or without badges, and in some instances they are prosecuted. There are times when persons are taken directly before the courts, right?
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is that we have to reshape our program, to be honest with you. There has to be more public education for one thing. We're going to have to ensure we step up this program and to make it a little tighter
Yes.
for persons to be able to operate in the transport sector. Because clearly, this whole batch thing, in fact, one person told us on Tuesday in a meeting that he doesn't see the importance of having a badge.
He doesn't need to see it. Do without it and without the system.
And why does he need a badge?
Yeah.
And I said to him, listen, the fact of the matter, it's a law. The law says that for you to be operated in the public transport sector, you have to have a badge. Persons have to be able to identify you. And it is also part of the prerequisite to determine your suitability to operate within the sector.
I don't get that. Hold on a second. Let me come to Mr. Anderson now, because the problem that we may have with this new law, if it gets through the Senate, Mr. Anderson, it is probably being sold as if it is the all and end all of mayhem on the road. Tell me how you understand the Island Traffic Authority, how it will operate differently from Transport Authority to keep the data, because if you don't have electronic sharing of data, then all of this electronic monitoring of vehicles is going to come to naught. How is it going to work?
Well, one of the key things with the new act is that it makes the Island Traffic Authority, gives the Island Traffic Authority overall responsibility for traffic and traffic safety on the road. So they have been given that overarching responsibility. There are a number of things that are done by for example, the tax administration to interface with the public, which is, it's never been clarified in the law, but the law now clarifies that those things are done by delegation from the Island Traffic Authority. The data that the TAJ has is all hosted by eGov. The traffic ticketing system is hosted by eGov. So through eGov, the ITA will be able to get its hands on all of the data related to traffic matters, to taxi operator, taxi drivers, and so on. And one of the key things that's been done is to correct a flaw in the old legislation, which did not allow, although we designed a system of demerit points way back in, I think, 1999 or somewhere back there. The law was flawed. It didn't cite the Island Traffic Authority as the authority able to revoke licenses and so on, or suspend licenses. So that flaw has been corrected. So the Road Traffic Appeal Tribunal, which was always there in the law and which used to meet, but which had to stop because it was deemed that they didn't have the authority to do so. All of that mechanism will now be put back into place. So the Island Traffic Authority will be able to suspend licenses for demerit points. They and/or the courts will be able, for repeat offenders, to require retraining of drivers. Right? Drivers who refuse to pay their traffic tickets won't be able to renew their driver's licenses or renew the vehicle licenses for the vehicles associated with the offenses.
And for the drivers not paying their licenses, their tickets, it would only be in relation to the police now giving you
with the police issuing tickets on site.
Because that will still go on.
That will continue. There'll be no change to that.
Right.
That will continue.
Okay.
So the Island Traffic Authority will have a better handle, or has a potential to have a better handle on everything that is going on.
So hold on. So when I get if I get a ticket from a policeman on site, and I go to the tax office to pay before the time that it's supposed to go to court, the data from tax office about payment will be linked with the data
It
of
is
the
on the
island
system
traffic?
right now.
Right away,
It's on
okay.
the system right now.
So they can see that I have an outstanding
Right.
ticket.
As soon as a ticket is issued, it's supposed to be entered within 3 days. Now, sometimes the police slip a bit on
Yeah.
that, but it's supposed to be entered within 3 days. And when you go to the tax office to pay, it immediately updates the system to say that the ticket has been paid. If you opt to go to court,
Yes.
when the court is finished with the case, the court is supposed to update the system to
Right.
say that the case has been cleared
Right.
and the matter is now settled.
And all of that will be
All
seen
of
on the
that is
island
in
traffic
one system,
database.
right. Well, it's now in disparate databases, but as I
Right.
say, the Island Traffic Authority will have overall control
Yes,
of
and
all
it's
of
going
that.
to join up. I'm going to ask all of you to give me some more time on the radio program, a little bit more to finish this, because I think it's very important for people to understand how it's going to work. And crucially, perhaps we can hear from some of the taxi operators who are out there. But that is all the time we have in this segment on Hotline Interface for this discussion. I want to thank you so much. Thank you to my production team, and look forward to coming back with you again. Thank you to Victor Anderson, Cessa Morgan, Petra Keane Williams. Take good care until next week. I'm Emily Shields.